Welcome back to the Heart Podcast. In this episode, episode 5, we're having a fun interview with Tony Thayer about confidence and leadership. Hope you enjoy.
Sweet.
Okay, we're live.
Woohoo! We're actually so this isn't being simulcast anywhere right now.
No, I know.
Okay, just some people do that for their podcasts.
Yeah.
They live stream and then they post it. So this is just I'm just recording it. So cool. Thanks for doing this, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to be challenged. I'll turn off my phone so that doesn't bother us.
Oh yeah, it's a good point. Silence our phones. Oh, mine is silenced. Oh my, that's good. Okay. I think, as I recall, we were going to talk about leadership and mental health.
Yeah, I had characterized it as motivation. It's that whole story about your boys waiting until things are perfect before they jump into action.
Yeah, and that's an interesting. So, how do you want to start this? Do you have
I think a great, if you're up for focusing on that, and we can certainly do other things, but then I'd suggest we start with you retelling the story. Like, you have this interesting observation about talking to two young people.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. We can start from there. Cool. So, and it's changed now, which is really interesting, right? It's from then till now.
Oh, cool.
So the backstory on this, for those that are watching the podcast or listening to the podcast, is that a few months ago I started this conversation with my kids about confidence, and the first thing I really wanted to understand was what their mental model was and how they thought about confidence in their language. And when they explained it, the commonality between them was that they needed to be perfect before they could start something, and that they saw confidence as being a place where they knew how to do something so well that they couldn't be criticized for it. Which, in everything I've ever tried, my starting attempts always would be worthy of criticism, just because I'm just not good at stuff when I started, which I think probably is some portion of the population. But we started talking about it and getting into this conversation about doing things, starting off doing it badly, practicing things. And they've done this. Like, I had to remind them about their water polo journey and how they'd started off being not very good at it. And then over time, kind of leveling up their skill levels at different things that they were doing in the water polo environment. And I'm seeing, and Tony and I started talking about parallels to these with people around their careers, same kind of problems where people aren't moving forward in their careers because they don't know how to do it perfectly. And I think that's where we want to segue into. What are your thoughts, Mr. Thayer?
Well, what strikes me about that story is that it imposes a corollary to confidence, which creates hesitancy. Like, the idea of confidence is knowing how to do something perfect and holding back from taking action until you're not just confident, but certain that you'll know how things work out. What it's bringing up for me is that old quote from Teddy Roosevelt about the man in the arena. Like, it's not the critic whose perspectives are important. It's the man who's actually in the arena fighting the fight and discovering what doesn't work, but having the confidence that somehow he'll find a way in the moment to overcome. And so for me, confidence is a matter of just being able to jump in without knowing how to swim and figuring out how to get to the other side.
Yeah. The idea of, and this is something that I've been talking with my kids about, is what are the tiny risks that you can start to take where you can start to experiment, right? With, if you're going to jump in the water, rather than jumping in, can you stick your face in the water and blow bubbles? And how do you nibble away at your lack of knowledge to get yourself to a place where you do have knowledge, and how do you learn about it? Yeah.
Well, I think there's a distinction we can draw here too between the word confidence and what would be the word skill.
Yeah.
You can have the skill to do something perfectly, but confidence is sort of a relationship with oneself that, like, if you don't know how to swim, but you have to get across a river, you can formulate a sentence in your mind of like, wow, a dog can just naturally jump in the water and dog paddle across. What's a dog got that I don't have?
Right. Right.
And you don't know how you're going to do it, but if you have the confidence that you're as good as a dog, then you'll probably figure it out. It'll be sloppy, it'll be messy, and it'll get better the next time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But sort of confidence is, to me, the willingness to jump in the arena and just figure things out in the moment so that you can have the skill to do them and teach them to others.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I think swimming's a really good analogy for this, because what you could do also is you want to cross a river, but you don't know how to. And so, but there's a place in school where you can get swimming lessons.
Right.
And so that way you can go find out, someone can teach you how to swim and get you through the process so that the river crossing is a lot less risky, because your competency level has moved up, right? It's kind of for people that are afraid of public speaking, they can go to Toastmasters, and they can start to learn the skills. They can be taught all these skills for public speaking in a controlled environment. And so that way, when suddenly they have a presentation to give at work or some other kind of a speaking thing, they've had this training ground before they move into that space.
So there's, so we're continuing to talk about like these two things, the skill of knowing you can do something, which of course lets you feel confident, but there's also the more amorphous sense of confidence that you can do something without knowing how to do it.
Right, right.
And just there's like that, I just think of the vastness of the totality of the human being. Like we're so caught up in our cognitive skills, and our whole culture is based on knowing how to do things before you do them, or preparing you. And we go to high school, we go to college, and then we start working, and we're just like imbued with this idea of, oh, I need all these skills.
Right.
But there's this other part of the human experience of just like you just have a native ability in the moment to listen, understand, and respond with whatever you got.
Right.
And we're often surprised that we have so much more than we would have expected. And we kind of lost that in our culture. So yeah, you can go to school, you can go to a coach and learn how to swim or learn how to wrestle or do these things. But that's kind of an excuse for deferring action till later.
Yeah, yeah.
And for me, confidence is, I've been playing with this old phrase recently of like, if not now, when?
Right.
And it's easy to say, well, I'll do it when I learn how to swim. But if you're on the trail, in the backcountry and the water's too deep to ford it, and you actually have to, paddle across it.
Right, right.
Then that implies that you're going to turn back and go home and do this hike another day.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah.
So I'd love to see schools and institutions really promote the idea of like, just do it, just make mistakes, just have the confidence to jump in, get wet, make a mess,
right.
Have somebody save your ass if you really can't do it. But so long as you've made the attempt and you don't get too traumatized by it, then you come back stronger. And if need be, when you go back home, you do start taking classes because you're inspired. Before we started recording, I was just saying, like, I've been hiking up this real steep hill in the Berkeley Hills for 2 or 3 years now. And I've always just thought, one of these days I want to try running it. I see these people in awesome shape running it. And I keep thinking like, wow, it's kicking my ass now. So I'll just have to like get to the point where I can do it twice before I can run it once. And I've never, but I came back from this hike up a really steep hill in Big Sur, and I just resolved I was going to start running. And yesterday I did. You know, if not now, when? It's so
Right.
easy for us to put things off, and I've got a whole lifetime of stories of embarrassing moments where I put things off. I wish I had just done them.
Well, you can make yourself a list and you can go back and you go like, okay, let's see. I need to do this and this and this and this and this. And today it's running up the hill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I can tell young people like, well, you're not swimming across the river. Let me tell you about all the times where I didn't do things. So we'll
Right.
both do nothing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. It's a, I'm, since I started this conversation with my kids about doing stuff badly. So the two are very different in their worlds. My younger one is, because he's into cars, we had to do some repairs on his car.
Mm-hmm.
And at first he was really apprehensive about starting it.
Yeah.
And we had this conversation about the only way you're going to learn is by doing it, right? You're not going to magically suddenly become an expert in working on your cars without ever touching the car. Like that just, it doesn't work that way, right? And so the first things that we did were, I was very much with him and doing stuff and hands-on, and here's the next one step. We have to take that one thing out, get that wrench in the toolbox, and it was very, I was giving him a lot of instruction.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next time I said, okay, we have to take this one piece out that's part of the engine cover. You know how to do that, because we did it last time. And I let him basically do it on his own. Yesterday, there was another thing that he wanted to do on the car, and I wasn't home. He came home and started working on it without any prompting or anything.
Nice.
Yeah, and just dove into it. And what we figured out along the way, he said, okay, this is going to take longer than I thought. I'm going to stop now, put it all back together again, and then come back on Sunday when I've got more time, and we'll be able to spend 3 or 4 hours on this thing, because he recognized the time, right? And he was really comfortable with that mental model. And I think,
yeah, so not only did he jump into the arena, but he had some boundaries on how much time he had, and he got to
right.
the sort of turnaround point and put it all back together.
Yeah. And so the thing that excites me about this is that it's easier than people think to learn how to take tiny risks.
Yeah.
And I had talked with him in advance about setting up this learning opportunity where every time was, the starting point would be this tiny level 1 risk, and then the next time it would be a level 2 risk, and the next time it would be a level 3 risk, but each time the increment was only 1.
Yeah.
And it was very approachable in that way. And so now he's like, okay, I need to do this stuff, right? And I'm like, oh, this is so cool. Yeah.
Yeah, you're talking about many risks. I use the word, like when people are when I am coaching people to challenge their own assumptions, I suggest what I call mini missions. Just if what you think and believe might not be true, then how could you test whether there's greater possibilities?
Right.
Not just go all the way in, get totally wet, but just do a few things and realize, oh, didn't turn out the way I thought it would. It turned out better. And,
yeah.
I think I love many missions. Just to just notice that something's holding you back and and just assume that that's not going to be in your way.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting. With my younger son, it was easy to set that stack up for him. In a work context, how would somebody set up that kind of a thing for either themselves or people on their team?
Right. Well, what I just heard you say about the car work that you and your son did is initially you were standing with him, mentoring him through the selection of tools,
Hmm.
and then the next time you were available to him, then you had him do something on his own,
Right.
and then he came home and did it on his own. So there's that beautiful progression,
Right.
which demonstrates a sense of confidence and assuredness as he approaches something that's growing and developing.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, I think supervisors and leaders at work can suggest to their people they try something that seems outside of their realm of possibility,
Right. Right.
and and either be there by their side or just keep it small enough to just let me know how it goes. I'll
Right.
come back.
Yeah.
Which gets to me one of the cool things about some of the leadership ideas that are out there is this idea of radical patience. You don't have to have somebody be perfect today. As a
Right.
leader, you can have radical patience and just suggest to them these little mini missions so that over
Right.
time they learn to trust themselves. It's more important they trust themselves than they trust you, really.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point. It's I just saw an article on LinkedIn last week. I
Mm-hmm.
think it was last week that the number two thing that people, this is a big survey, I think Gallup did it, but the number two thing that people wanted at work was an understanding of how to achieve a forward career path.
Hmm.
And I was surprised about that because I would have thought that more companies were doing a better job. And yet at the same time, I know anecdotally, no one that I've talked with recently works at a company, irrespective of the company size, where that forward progression in their career path is laid out and is understood and has leadership working to level people up. It's not there.
So just for me to clarify what we're talking about here, this
Yeah.
article is saying that almost everyone in almost every type of company, when they're young, doesn't feel like there's a process to develop them so they can get the kind of promotions and step up
Exactly. Yeah.
where they want to be.
Yeah.
So we're all left floundering on our own to figure it out.
Right.
And our bosses are all probably okay with it being that way because that's the way it was for them. Everybody was just floundering around, and some people figured it out and some people didn't. And we somehow assume the people who figured it out are smarter. By virtue of that, everybody who didn't is dumb.
Yeah.
It's that whole failure thing. But yeah, why can't leaders articulate what they'd like to see their employees do that their employees aren't currently doing?
Yeah. I'm gonna make a guess that it's a chicken or egg problem. You have to have somebody with a starting point to explain and then model and do the behavior to move people forward. I know that years ago, HP was known for developing leaders.
Yeah.
But part of their culture was training programs that anybody could get into to teach you how to level up to the next level of any org chart or horizontally into other parts of the company.
Mm-hmm.
The problem was that some number of years ago, they decided that was an expense that they could cut and that it wouldn't harm the company. Unfortunately, though, HP has lost its luster compared to where they were before.
Yeah.
And I look around the valley and nobody else seems to have anything like that.
It's like they lost the confidence to
Yeah.
engage in an expense because the rewards weren't as tangible as the bean counters needed them to be.
Right.
Yeah. And that's another case of confidence.
Yeah.
One of the other things I'm glad you brought up Hewlett Packard, because one of the things they were also famous for was that thing that Tom Peters talked about in that first management book. But
Seven Habits.
no, what was Tom Peters had a In Search of Excellence.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah,
remember reading that way back when I was first starting in the business world. That sort of opened my eyes to like how you can develop yourself and how it's done. There was a lot of stuff in his book where he cited Hewlett Packard, and one of the things that really caught my attention was management by walking around.
right. Yep.
And the contrast in today's world is like I know a lot of leaders, we call them leaders, they're really managers. They have so much on their plate personally that they really don't take time to mentor and understand what's going on for
Right.
their staff. Well, they give it what they can, and they understand that it's part of their responsibility, and they need to do it. But there's so much else demanding their attention that they really have to parcel it out carefully.
Right.
But this management by walking around is where, as a leader, one of your most important duties is to understand what's going on out on the floor.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I really related to it as when I read Tom Peters, and then I really leaned on it when I became a supervisor myself, because when I was 8 to 12, I got to watch my dad do that. He was a vice president of a retail, like company that later was bought up by Macy's.
Hmm.
They had 14 stores in the Bay Area. It was just a regional business, but they were well known. They went back to the early 1900s, and they were a familiar name. And on Saturday, one Saturday a month, my dad had to work on Saturdays. And when I got to that age, he'd take me with him because what he did on Saturdays is visit all the stores. He got out of the headquarters and he would walk up to every sales desk on every floor. And most of these department stores were 3 and 4 stories high.
Oh, nice.
And I came to realize from doing this for a few years with him that he knew the names of every sales associate on every floor at every desk for the whole company. And he would walk up to them and he would chat about their kids, their families, their vacations. And I don't think they ever realized what I came to see from watching him over and over was he was collecting really tangible information. He was learning what was selling, what wasn't selling, and what people were asking for that they didn't even have. And then he
Right.
was having meetings with his buyers and coming from a really informed place because he was managing by walking around. He knew what was going on.
Right.
And everybody knew him. And he obviously, like sort of back to the HP things, the untangible benefits he got from that, just from knowing people, is he understood what people's values and concerns were.
Right.
And that just made him a more personable leader. And he could
That is
relate to
very enlightened perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Enlightened and yet old fashioned. It's like Hewlett Packard cut that whole thing out. They were the exemplar
Right.
of doing just that.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes those old-fashioned ways of doing things are still the better way to go because we're still human beings.
Yeah.
And we operate in particular ways that just because of technology, it doesn't change the way we operate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it really gets back to this whole topic of confidence. Because if you're a leader who's managing by walking around and you understand how it is out there on the floor, out there in the hinterlands, wherever, you have greater confidence to take
Right.
actions.
Right.
And that those actions will be well received by the troops because you understand what it's like for them.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's interesting. One of the first companies that I worked for here in the Valley, they had both a digital and a physical business.
Mm.
And the physical business, when I started, was the biggest revenue generator in the company. And at those events, the CEO, well, actually all the executives, they had this policy that at those events, all the executives showed up in t-shirts and blue jeans, and they acted just like the temporary hires that had been made to help out everybody that was there.
Mm-hmm.
And they were just like anybody else. It was like, if you need help, look for one of those people in the orange t-shirt and the blue jeans. And that's the staff that's here to help you. And people didn't if you for your first time being there, you wouldn't know who these people were in relationship to the company, right? Which
Right.
was kind of funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, they learned a ton because they were talking to the customers. They were talking to other people. They got a really good ground level understanding of what was going on. Yeah. Yeah. And they made better decisions because they were better informed. And the other thing about confidence is they didn't care that people didn't know that they were one of the executives.
Right.
Right. Just didn't matter. Right. And what's really funny is the CEO never introduced himself as the CEO of the company. He always said, "Hi, I'm so-and-so, and I work with this company." And that was it. Like every time I ever heard him introduce himself, that's all he ever said. Yeah, that's kind of funny. And he definitely knew the customers really, really, really well.
Yeah. So there's a part of our language, we call them prepositional phrases. It's things about, the microwaves on top of the counter. It's about what position it is relative to something else, which is what hierarchy is, which is, so when people talk about how they're the CEO or the executive, they're above you. And people lose confidence when they feel like those above them are in a position to judge. There's all these stories of Steve Jobs,
Right.
How he fired people in elevators because the one thing they said, and instills this fear. And for leaders to instill confidence, that's a great practice. Just to refer to yourself as, John Smith of ABC Company.
Right.
No,
Right.
all of a sudden you're taking that preposition out and not having people relate to you in relation to who you are and what you do, but just relate to you.
Right. Right.
And it's easier to have confidence in not knowing something when the people around you are relatable.
Right.
And I think with, like the stories, I think the other story, your other son, I remember from our earlier conversation was uh, hesitating to take actions in water polo because the coach would slam him for not doing it right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's, so that's not a relatable person, and it creates hesitation. And I'm really fascinated with how people end up being hesitant to do things where if they just jumped in, they'd figure it out.
Right. Right. Yeah. A lot of the culture right now, and I hear this from people, and my partner hears this from people all the time, is they're afraid to take action because they're afraid they'll get it wrong.
Right.
Even in really small things. And part of the way they verbalize it is, I want someone to tell me exactly what to do, because I don't want to try and take the risk of inventing this idea. So you got to tell me exactly what to do.
Well, and underneath that, what I'm hearing in that example is that somebody wants to know exactly how to do that so they won't feel judged.
Right. Right.
They won't get slammed. They won't have a reputation for being an idiot. And
right. Right.
It just speaks to human vulnerability. And when we work with people who are relatable and understanding and encouraging and not going to slam them, then we're actually fostering a work environment where people do take risks and can laugh at themselves when they're all wet, when they fall into the puddle.
Right. Yeah.
But if that's part of the, if we want learning organizations and organizations that can change and dynamically reinvent themselves, we're going to face lots of situations where we don't know how to do things, where we ask things of people they don't know how to do. And I don't know, maybe it's old cowboy logic, but if you just get on a horse and try and I've often wondered when I looked at rodeos and stuff, like how many times do you have to take that lasso and try to get the cow down? Do you just miss? There's got to be hundreds of times. It's like, you fall down, and you mess up.
Yeah, you have to have it's it goes back to having the confidence to try it, even when you don't have the competence. And just, I bet with the lasso, you probably start off standing still with a lasso and a spike that you can throw it over. And then you try it walking, like there's got to be it's a skills progression, right?
Yeah, right.
Because it's unlikely that your starting point's going to be on a horse chasing a calf and that you're going to get that. Like there's so many complexities there,
Yeah.
Or at least for me, I want the baby steps version of that. But yeah, it's an interesting set of how do you get people to change their mindsets and then start jumping into that kind of thing. Yeah.
But anyway, I think the theme we're working on here is that confidence is the willing to jump in and try when you don't know how.
Right.
And skill is the assurance you have when you know exactly what to do.
Right.
You've done it, you know how to lasso a cow. Okay, you might still miss, but you're confident because 9 times out of 10 you get it.
Right.
And I think it's great for leaders to understand the distinction because it's a fantastic thing to build an organization where people have the confidence to get wet.
Right.
And to laugh at themselves when they do.
And it's a good ROI too.
Yeah.
I think that's the other part of it is that it's a good ROI because when your team knows that their leadership trusts them and that they can take risks, they're going to do better work.
Yeah.
So, it's a good thing.
And I love the example of the executive at your former business who, had people wear green shirts and act like temps and just make themselves available for the general staff to ask questions of.
Yeah.
Because it just shows such a human side of leadership.
Right. Yeah. Sweet. This has been awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, cool.
For anybody can you give like a 2-minute or 5-minute pitch about your business and what you do?
Yeah, I can.
You got a flyer.
It's funny because I just did a video for the first time. I cut a video yesterday. It's just practice, and my partner liked it, but wasn't enthusiastic about it. She said, "You'll do great if you just do a video like that once a day, every day."
Right.
And you get good at it. So it's just kind of funny. Like
Okay, well.
Yeah. So we call our business, I'm Tony Thayer, and my website is not yet up, but we're building TonyThayerCoaching.com. But what we do is we work with companies of 30 to 3,000 employees to help them create vibrant cultures. Vibrant cultures I characterize as having a driven energy that's inclusive, high energy, and high performance. And there's basically 5 characteristics that we help our clients, we mentor our clients to bring their people around so that they create a vibrant culture where everyone feels encouraged to speak up and contribute, and where everyone feels that they trust and respect one another, and that they see conflict as means of growth, of creating new alliances and finding new solutions. And really, everybody's just fully engaged because they know they matter and what they do makes a difference. And they're willing to, just the kind of things we're doing, confidence, they're willing just to try and get out there and always have an outward focus on customers so they can show themselves as being responsive to the needs of others, even when they don't know how. And ultimately, it's one where everyone ensures that their customers feel taken care of because their voices have been heard. So those are the 5 principles that we bring our clients around to spread across their corporate cultures to create a vibrant culture that's inclusive and high energy and high performance.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you. And what's your email?
I'm at thayer.tony@gmail.com.
Awesome. That sounds pretty easy.
Yeah.
Thayer. And
Right.
I'll put that email address in the show notes and the URL for your website also.
Yeah, and it rhymes with Bayer aspirin, so hopefully that can solve some headaches for people out there.
I like it. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome.